My name is Sarah Whitman, and the night I heard my husband whisper, "Let her sign it and we'll take it all," was the night my world began to tilt off its axis. Those 9 words didn't just break the fragile trust in our marriage, they ignited a storm inside me, a storm that would carry me straight into the courtroom where his face would turn to stone. At first I thought I'd dreamed it. The voice was low, careful, the kind of whisper you use when you don't want the truth to travel. I had woken to the faint creak of floorboards, the hush of voices slipping through the half-closed door at the end of our hallway. It was past midnight, and the house should have been sleeping. I pushed back the covers, heart thudding. Our bedroom window let in a streak of moonlight cutting across the carpet like a silver blade. My bare feet were cold against the wood as I moved toward the door, every instinct warning me not to breathe too loudly. And then I heard him, my husband of 28 years, Robert. His voice was unmistakable, calm, steady, calculated. Let her sign it and we'll take it all. I froze, my breath catching. For a moment I was convinced my heart had stopped. Who was he talking to? And what exactly was I supposed to be signing? I didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, I darted back to bed like a child caught sneaking out after curfew. By the time Robert returned, I was lying still under the sheets, eyes shut, chest rising in slow, steady rhythm. He slid beneath the covers, smelling faintly of whiskey and expensive cologne, the kind he wore only on important days. His body shifted beside me, and after a long sigh, he settled. I remember whispering into the darkness, "What did I just hear?" The next morning, the house looked the same as it always did, sunlight spilling through the kitchen blinds, the smell of coffee drifting through the air. But nothing felt the same. Robert hummed to himself as he read the paper, as if last night's secret conversation had been nothing but smoke in my imagination. I studied him from across the table, his neatly pressed shirt, his gold watch gleaming under the light, his expression unreadable. He caught me staring and smiled, that warm, charming smile that had once made me believe in forever. "You okay, Sarah?" he asked. I forced a smile, just tired. But inside my stomach twisted. That day, I replayed the whisper over and over in my head. Let her sign it. We'll take it all. It didn't sound like a joke. It didn't sound like a throwaway line. It sounded like intent, purpose. I tried to shake it off. After all, Robert had always been the planner in our family. He managed our finances, oversaw the property, handled the taxes. I trusted him with everything. Maybe he was just discussing some new investment with a friend, some contract he needed me to look at. But if that were true, why the secrecy? Why the late-night hush in our hallway? That evening, he came home later than usual. His tie was loosened, his hair a little mussed, but his grin was intact. He kissed my cheek lightly and set a briefcase down by the couch. "Tough day?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. You could say that he muttered before pouring himself a drink. "But things are moving along. Big opportunities, Sarah. You'll see." I nodded, though confusion prickled at me. Opportunities for who? The following nights fell into a rhythm. Robert on the phone in hushed tones. Papers stacked neatly on his desk, their edges crisp and untouched. A few times he asked me to sign something small, a utility update, a refinancing form, at least that's what he called them. Each time I hesitated, flipping through the pages, and each time he grew just a little more insistent. "Sarah, you don't need to read every line. Trust me, it's just paperwork." Trust. That word stung. One night I gathered my courage. As he leaned against the counter, sipping his bourbon, I asked Robert, "Who were you talking to the other night?" He blinked. "What night?" "Last week. I thought I heard you in the hallway. Around midnight." A pause just a fraction too long, then a shrug. "Probably just a client call. You know how people are always panicking after hours." He said it so smoothly, like he had rehearsed it. But I caught the twitch in his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. That was when I realized I wasn't imagining things. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. The whispers weren't just paranoia. The documents weren't just paperwork. And my husband, the man I had trusted with my life, was planning something I couldn't yet name. I went to bed that night with a heaviness in my chest, staring at the ceiling while Robert slept soundly beside me. I thought about the years we had shared our first apartment with the leaky faucet, the nights we stayed up late worrying about bills, the vacations we had promised ourselves but never took. And now, this. Secrets. Lies. A sentence that haunted me with every breath. Let her sign it and we'll take it all. The storm hadn't fully arrived yet, but the clouds were gathering. I could feel it pressing against the walls of our home, seeping into the spaces between us. Something was coming, and I needed to be ready. I needed to know the truth. By the third morning after the whisper, the kitchen had become a crime scene of small changes only I could see. The fruit bowl was overfull like he'd stopped at the expensive market and wanted me to notice our abundance. The mail stack had been sorted too neatly, edges aligned in a way Robert never bothered with. And his phone always face down now, always silent screen lighting his palm like a secret candle whenever he passed the hallway. I poured coffee and watched the steam lift. The scent was comforting, familiar, stubbornly normal. Robert came in humming that chipper baritone he used when he'd already decided how a day would go. He kissed my temple and reached past me for the cabinet. "Big meeting," he said, too casual, thinking of revisiting our estate plan. Tidying up. We're not getting younger. We, I repeated, letting the word roll around my mouth. What needs tidying? He lifted a brow, smiling as if I'd cracked a decent joke. Nothing complicated. Beneficiary forms a couple of transfer on death designations. It helps us avoid probate. Less mess if God forbid something happens. Cassandra's going to walk us through it. Cassandra. Estate planning attorney, he said, tossing the name in like cream. Friend of Evan's. She works fast. Evan. The nameless other voice in the hall now had a shape. I kept my face still, but my mind filed it away. Cassandra. Evan. Let's do lunch with her, he added. You'll like her, very professional. I stirred my coffee while the house held its breath. The refrigerator hummed into a new cycle. Outside, a blue jay scolded the empty air. I nodded once. Okay. The first red flag wasn't a flag. It was a neat blue folder Robert left on his desk, half tucked under an old alumni magazine like a Shire guest at the party. I wasn't proud of it, but I looked. The top sheet was a placeholder letter, Whitman Family Revocable Trust, simplification packet. Down the page came the soft words, Americans over 45 here, like a hymn, clarity, efficiency, protection, peace of mind. At the bottom, someone had handwritten, if Sarah is hesitant, emphasize, TOD, pod, and probate avoidance. The casual use of my first name landed like a thumb on my sternum. If Sarah is hesitant. That night, I opened our bank app, an app I used maybe once a month for reassurance. The account balances sat there like polite guests at a dinner I hadn't planned. Nothing alarming at first glance, but when I slid into the transaction history, my pulse picked up. A rhythm of withdrawals had started 8 weeks ago, $480, $950, $300 odd amounts that didn't match the steady drumbeat of mortgage, utilities, groceries. Memo lines were sparse payee, EM services, wire K&L title. The names were almost words like someone had scraped them thin with a knife. I copied the amounts onto a page of the yellow legal pad we kept by the landline, the way my mother used to copy recipes, slow and neat, so nothing spilled. In the margin, I wrote, ask about EM services. Then I tore the page carefully away and slid it into the cookbook that still smelled faintly like cinnamon whenever I lifted the cover. Cassandra arrived as promised 2 days later with a handshake and the tidy smile of a woman whose shoes never squeaked. We met at a quiet bistro where the napkins were heavy and the waiter said, sparkling or still without missing a beat. She laid down a slim leather portfolio and a fountain pen that gleamed like wet ink. First, she said, I want to affirm that simplification is an act of love. She had a voice like polished wood, warm, smooth, reassuring. I work with families all the time who wait too long. It can be chaos. Robert nodded solemnly, playing the role of responsible husband with an alarming ease. Exactly why I wanted to move now. Cassandra smiled at me. We'll keep this painless. I'll translate the legalese. You'll leave with a sense that everything is where it belongs. Where it belongs? I repeated and found my smile somewhere behind my teeth. She walked us through a series of diagrams, flow charts of what went where when one of us died or became incapacitated. Arrows for homes, arrows for accounts, arrows for things you can't put in a box, but can still lose if someone is careless. The pages were precise and pretty a map to a future I didn't want to visit. Then came the forms. They were flagged with pale green tabs. Each tab, a soft request, sign here. Initial, there. Cassandra narrated like a tour guide. This one updates beneficiaries on the brokerage. This assigns payable on death to the checking goes directly to the survivor. This, she tapped a page that had more paragraphs than margin, clarifies the trust's title to the residents. It's a quitclaim, but just a formality. Quitclaim, I asked, letting the unfamiliarity sit between us. It's a way to ensure the trust holds clear title, Cassandra said evenly. Less paperwork later. As long as we're not changing underlying rights, it's tidy. Robert lifted his glass of iced tea and took a slow sip. Just tidying, he echoed. Cassandra slid the pen toward me. We can sign today and file before the end of the week. I'll handle recording. Seamless. The pen's weight surprised me. It felt like a promise and a trap. The page smelled faintly of toner, a new paper scent that made my tongue dry. I skimmed slower than she wanted me to. The words were dense legal thickets with friendly glades for convenience to avoid delay to reduce administrative burden. In the middle of the quitclaim paragraph, a phrase caught like a burr grantor conveys and quitclaims to grantee all right title and interest. I looked up. Who's the grantee? The trust, Cassandra said smoothly. The Whitman Family Revocable Trust. Who's trustee, I asked. Robert smiled a little too quick. We are joint. We can confirm, Cassandra added, flipping to a page already labeled. Indeed, Robert and Sarah co-trustees. My finger hovered over a footnote that had I been 25, I might have skipped. What's this about successor trustee? Standard, she said, as if she were describing the weather. If something happens to both of you, you name someone who can step in. Robert suggested Evan. Longtime friend, yes? A sound in my chest wasn't quite a laugh. Evan. The hallway whisper found its echo here at a linen-draped table. Let her sign it and we'll take it all. I set the pen down with care, as if dropping it fast might set off an alarm. I'd like to read these at home, I said, keeping my tone companionable. I sleep better when I've taken my time. Of course, Cassandra said, smile undisturbed. I encourage clients to be comfortable. She slid the papers back into their folder. But the month-end filing window is ideal, so sooner is better. Robert's hand found my knee under the table, a gentle pressure that would have charmed me once. We'll look tonight, he said. We didn't. After dinner, he took a call on the back porch, the screen door clicking shut with surgeon's neatness. The cicadas buzzed heat into the dark. I stood just inside the kitchen, the air conditioning breathing cool along my ankles, and listened to the lowered register of his voice. She's cautious, he said. We'll make it sound like taxes. No, she won't ask many questions if Cassandra's there. Yes, I'll push the deadline. Cautious. Taxes. Deadline. I held my breath and let those words tattoo themselves to the inside of my skull. When he came back in, he smiled like we were in on the same joke. You don't need to lose sleep over this, he said, opening the freezer for ice. It's grown-up homework. I nodded, because it was easier than fighting shadows. But later, while he showered, I eased open his briefcase. The leather gave a soft sigh. Inside a narrow envelope from Monroe Title Services wore a thin rubber band, the way money wears a ring. I didn't open it. Not yet. I traced the company's name with my fingertip and felt the sting like touching a cold railing in winter. In bed, the mattress remembered our bodies and made space where his weight settled. His breathing fell into its regular climb and fall. Mine didn't. I stared at the ceiling and counted the soft flashes of passing cars painting the walls. By flash 7, I slipped from the sheets and padded to the kitchen. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and vanilla candles and the ghost of roast chicken. Under the cookbook, the yellow page waited. I added 2 new lines, Monroe title. Quit claim. Then, without quite knowing when I'd decided, I wrote one more, no signatures without counsel. It was small as vows go, but it was mine. I turned off the last light and stood in the doorway a moment longer, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick and the quiet human sound of someone I had loved for 28 years, sleeping. The night felt longer than usual, like a road stretching past the headlights. I wrapped my robe around myself, went back to bed, and tucked the pen Cassandra lent me into the drawer of my nightstand, where it would stay, waiting for the morning I would no longer need to be careful. I woke to Robert moving with purpose drawers, briefcase coffee, the brisk choreography of a man mid-plan. When he set a cappuccino in front of me, he also set Cassandra's blue folder, now thick with new tabs, yellow-green, and a single red like a warning flare. Tax time, he said. Cassandra can meet us at 2. We sign, we celebrate, we forget about it. Everything today, I asked? Estate titling, beneficiaries, housekeeping. He flipped the folder open. The top document looked friendly. Transfer on death beneficiary designation. The second did not quitclaim deed. Primary residence. In a paragraph shaped like a net, the sentence waited, grantor conveys and quitclaims to grantee all right title and interest. I traced the grantee line. Whitman Family Revocable Trust, Robert Whitman Trustee. Just you, I asked. Recordings cleaner, he said. We both still control it. The next sheet hummed with precise words, spousal waiver of homestead and elective share. Why am I waiving? I asked. It's a formality, he soothed. Belt and suspenders. You're protected by the trust. Belt and suspenders had always sounded like caution. Today, it sounded like cuffs. I kept reading, a durable power of attorney named Evan Mercer for finances. My name appeared only on the health directive. When did we decide Evan runs our money if something happens? I asked. We talked at Evan's cookout, he said easily. You hate paperwork. I remembered that June deck, the way he parked me by the grill while he and Evan disappeared inside. He produced a sleek black pen and slid it toward me. Let's get the dull bits behind us. I'm going to read, I said. Sarah. He timed my name like a sigh. We went over this with Cassandra. We glanced. The quitclaim footer read Monroe title Rev QC 12.2. A bland page titled Non-Probate Transfer Acknowledgement hit its teeth in paragraph 6. Consenting spouse hereby relinquishes any and all present and future claims, including statutory elective share dower and community property equivalents. Relinquishes. Dower. Old words that still cut. We're not signing today, I said. His smile folded. You're anxious. Cassandra can answer questions. Then we'll bring a second opinion, I said. My own counsel. Silence gathered. His jaw flexed. We don't need to complicate a simple thing. Simple things don't need to be rushed, I said. And simple things don't need Evan. A muscle feathered at his temple. He set his palm on the folder wedding band, gleaming like a coin. We sign this afternoon. No, I said steadier than I felt. Not today. His phone buzzed. She's reading, he said into it, walking toward the hall. We'll handle it. Noon works. When he left, I opened the folder again. The recording instructions behind the quitclaim named Monroe Title Services, ATNC Lane. On the waiver, the footer read Lane and Cass LLP Form 7B, Spousal Rights Waiver. The names nested, Cassandra Lane, Lane and Cass. In his briefcase, because bad habits can make you brave, an envelope from Monroe Title had been opened and resealed. I slid out a photocopy, warranty deed, secondary property, grantee RKS Properties LLC. I didn't know RKS, but I knew the mailing address, Evan's office tower. Our printer lives in the laundry room. I made copies on the quiet setting and pressed the warm pages under the cookbook. Something that wasn't fear flickered to life. By late afternoon, the hall shadows turned blue. Robert came home brisk and pleasant, asked if I wanted Thai, then set a single page on the island like a recipe. "You can sign this one now," he said. "Just acknowledges receipt." The header looked innocent, receipt and acknowledgement. 2 paragraphs down, it slipped by signing below, recipient acknowledges and consents to the transfers herein described, and waives any notice requirements thereto. "I'll sign nothing without counsel," I said. His nostrils flared. Then he nodded once, as if he'd used his last tool and found the bolt unmoved. "Do what you need to do," he said, voice emptied of persuasion and of us. That night, I lay beside him listening to the quiet house refrigerator hum, baseboard clicks, a branch tapping the window. Sleep wouldn't come. My mother's voice did from a kitchen with avocado appliances in Sinatra on Sundays. "Read the paper you sign, not the story you're told." We had built a life on signed papers and told stories, our first lease, the first car note, the refinance he handled the year his mother got sick. Near midnight, I wrote at the top of a legal pad, "No signatures without counsel." Underneath, Monroe title, Lane and Cass, RKS Properties, Evan. Then I typed a message I would send at dawn. "Patricia, do you have time tomorrow? I need guidance on a trust, real estate transfer." Quietly. Robert's phone buzzed on the counter, a late text lighting the granite. Preview deadline, Friday. In the morning, he cooked breakfast bright and attentive. He slid an information release authorizing Cassandra's firm to coordinate filings with title recorder and financial institutions, including account updates, beneficiary changes, and retitling of jointly held property. "Sign this one," he said, "so Cassandra can do her job?" "I already said I'll wait," I replied. "Sarah, patient and practiced, this is routine." "Then routine can wait for routine review." He stared a beat, then smiled thinly. "There's a filing window. If we miss it, we repeat steps." "Good," I said. "Repeating catches mistakes." "You think there are mistakes." "I think there are choices," I said, "and I intend to make mine awake." When he left, the closing door was soft. The quiet wasn't peace. It was air after thunder. I gathered the copies from under the cookbook, slid them into a manila envelope, and wrote, "To be reviewed by counsel." I tucked it behind the flour bin. By noon, I had Patricia's reply, short, efficient, "Come at 3. Bring everything." I exhaled. Waiting for 3 o'clock, I opened the nightstand and found Cassandra's brass pen where I'd hidden it. I held its weight and realized it would never write my name on anything for Robert again. The trap lay on the table, cooling in its paper skin. It wasn't meant for me anymore. It was bait. My name still rang strange in my ears as I told Patricia everything start to finish. Her office was on the 12th floor of a brown brick downtown building, the kind with radiators painted shut and windows that rattled in windstorms. It smelled faintly of paper, lemon oil, and ink, a courtroom's cousin. Patricia Reed had been my neighbor once, when I was a young wife, learning to balance grocery lists with dream lists. Now she wore charcoal suits, sharp glasses, and the expression of someone who had escorted dozens of women through storms they hadn't chosen. She motioned me to sit, and I slid the manila envelope across her oak desk. "Walk me through," she said low-voiced, "and don't spare details." So, I did. From the whispered sentence, I overheard, "Let her sign it, and we'll take it all to Cassandra's clipped counsel, to Robert's folders, thick with forms I was meant to skim, not study." When I faltered, Patricia lifted a hand, steady as a metronome. "Go on." When I finished, the clock read nearly 4. She tapped the manila envelope once. "You brought copies." I nodded. She opened it, flipped through with the practiced eye of someone fluent in fine print. Her brows arched when she reached the quitclaim. Interesting choice of grantee. A trust with only his name as trustee is not ours. That's his. With your quitclaim, you'd have conveyed your ownership of the home directly to his trust. He could mortgage, sell, or gift it without you. I swallowed. He said it was just housekeeping. Patricia's mouth curved, not kindly. Housekeeping is paying property taxes. This is eviction dressed as estate planning. She plucked out the spousal waiver. And this no court would compel you to sign away your elective share unless you were entering into a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement. To tuck it in here is sloppy, frankly. My chest fluttered. Sloppy saves me. Sloppy gives us leverage, she said. But what matters is intent. He and Ms. Lane structured this to divest you. The power of attorney to Mercer, not a safeguard. It's collusion. They meant to shift authority to him in the event of Robert's incapacity or your resistance. I leaned back air-thin in my lungs, so I wasn't paranoid. No. Patricia folded her hands. You were observant. That difference saves people. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I saw my mother again, warning weary wiser than I'd credited in her lifetime. What now, I asked. Now, Patricia said we get strategic. Tell me, are you willing to confront this, even if it means the end of the marriage? The question sat between us cold but honest. I let it in. Yes, I won't be stripped blind while smiling. Good, Patricia said. She gathered the papers, neatly squared them against the desk. First, do not sign anything. Second, if presented with new documents, stall, say you'll review. Third, gather records. Bank accounts, deeds, titles, statements. Anything you can quietly access. Her eyes sharpened. Fourth, stay calm. Let him believe you're merely cautious. If he suspects you've lawyered up, they'll accelerate. We want them complacent until we're ready. My throat felt dry. Ready for what? For court, she said simply. Or negotiation. But given the malice in that whisper, court is likelier. I stared at the brass pen still in my purse. He'll keep pressing. He will, Patricia agreed. And every time he does, he creates a record of coercion. If Cassandra is foolish enough to put her name on filings, she joins him. And if Mercer appears, we trace the money. The air hummed with gravity. I realized I wasn't just protecting a house, but a lifetime. Patricia softened her tone. Sarah, betrayal like this cuts deeper than contracts. You'll feel grief rage, bewilderment. That's natural. But you also have something powerful, the truth. Courts still care for that. I exhaled a laugh too brittle to sound like one. Truth feels like tissue paper against brick walls. Sometimes tissue clogs the drain, she said, almost smiling. Remember that. I left her office with copies sealed back in my envelope and a new spine I hadn't carried in months. On the sidewalk, the sun fell low between buildings, staining everything gold and sharp. I pulled my scarf tighter, but the chill couldn't reach the steady warmth of knowing someone saw the trap and knew its seams. That night, Robert played gracious. He poured Merlot, asked about my day, set a plate of salmon with dill. It should have felt normal, but every motion looked rehearsed like a stage husband in a dinner scene. How was Patricia? He asked casually, slicing his fish. My fork paused. Patricia. Yes, he said smoothly. I saw her name on a mailer. Thought of her. I sipped my wine slowly, kept my eyes mild. I haven't seen her in years. A beat too long. His gaze flickered, calculating. He changed the subject to stock tickers. I let him. But under the table, my foot pressed the envelope hidden in my tote like a secret ally. By midnight, he was asleep, breath heavy and even. I slipped to the kitchen, retrieved a bank folder from the file drawer he thought I never touched. Statements spread before me, showed patterns, wire transfers accounts under RKS Properties LLC. Evan Mercer's shadow. I copied what I could on the kitchen printer, feeding sheets one by one so the hum stayed low. My fingers shook, not from fear anymore, but from purpose. When I slid the warm pages into the envelope, I realized I had become something Robert never expected prepared. In the bathroom mirror, lit by a single lamp, I studied my face. Lines carved by worry. Eyes that had once shone with trust, now sharpened with something harder. My name is Sarah Whitman, I whispered again, testing the sound, and I will not be erased. The woman staring back almost smiled. By now, I had traded illusions for clarity. Each day I lived under Robert's roof felt like sharing air with a man rehearsing betrayal. What once seemed like careless silence between us now revealed itself as calculation. And calculation, I knew, always had a clock ticking behind it. The days after my meeting with Patricia unfolded like theater. Robert played attentive husband. He filled my coffee before I asked, lingered in doorways with soft smiles, suggested little drives to the lake. But in every gesture, I heard that whisper again. Let her sign it, and we'll take it all. His tenderness was not affection. It was camouflage. At night, I sorted records. I found insurance policies naming him sole beneficiary annuities he'd purchased, quietly shell companies tied to Mercer's name. Patricia taught me to catalog date, amount, recipient note. By the second week, the manila envelope had tripled in thickness. I locked it in a fireproof box beneath blankets in the guest room closet. One Sunday afternoon, Robert appeared with Cassandra in tow, as though she were an old friend dropping by. She carried a slim leather case, eyes bright with professional chill. Sarah, Robert said, tone warm. Cassandra's got some updated drafts, just minor adjustments. Thought we could all go over them. I smiled like porcelain. How thoughtful. We sat at the dining table where birthdays had once been celebrated with cake. Cassandra laid out documents this time, glossier, thicker paper embossed with letterhead. These will streamline your estate, she said briskly. Nothing dramatic, just clarity. Judges like clarity. I picked up the first page and let silence stretch. What happens? I asked if clarity means one of us is left with nothing. Cassandra's smile was practiced. That won't happen. These forms are equitable. Equitable, a word polished until it lost its edge. I set the page down carefully. I'll need time. Robert's jaw tightened. Sarah, it's a formality. We've discussed this. Formality, I repeated. Then it can wait a few days more. Our eyes locked. His green irises, once my favorite shade, looked flat. He nodded finally, but the quiet in his throat was not surrender. It was warning. That night, I dreamed of paper, turning to ash, of voices echoing in empty rooms. I woke with sweat on my neck and the sound of Robert's even breathing beside me, calm as if nothing in his world threatened to unravel. 2 mornings later, Patricia called. He's pressing, isn't he? Yes, I said. He brought her here. Good, Patricia answered. Document it. If you can keep the drafts, we'll compare versions. And Sarah. Yes. Don't let him sense your strength yet. Storms are more devastating when they break suddenly. I almost smiled. I think I can manage that. The breaking came sooner than I expected. It was late October when Robert confronted me directly. He closed the den door, laid a folder on the desk, and leaned forward. Sarah, this is getting ridiculous. You're making yourself look paranoid. Sign these, and we can move on. I touched the folder with 2 fingers. And if I don't? His expression hardened. Then you make this uglier than it needs to be. And no one wins. I met his stare steadily. Sometimes ugliness is the only way truth shows its face. His lips pressed white. For the first time in years, I saw not the man who had once courted me with roses, but the man who believed roses bought silence. That night, I phoned Patricia. He's pushing harder. Good, she said. That means he's nervous. We're close to the line where the courts can intervene. Are you ready for that? I looked out the window at the autumn leaves, brittle gold scattered across the lawn. I'm ready. The summons arrived 2 weeks later. Petition for dissolution of marriage filed by Robert Whitman, represented by Cassandra Lane, with Evan Mercer listed as financial advisor. His terms equitable distribution, but with property already deeded into his trust. In his world, I owned nothing. I sat with Patricia in her office again, the petition spread between us. My hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. He really thinks he can do this, I whispered. He really does, Patricia agreed. And that Sarah is his mistake. We filed our response within days. Patricia's language was precise, surgical. She alleged coercion fraud, undue influence. She listed assets, undisclosed transfers, suspicious trusts designed to deprive. For every paper Robert had shuffled toward me, we had a counterweight. The weeks before trial stretched like taut wire. Robert and I still shared a roof, but conversation dwindled to logistics. Meals were separate. Doors closed harder. The silence carried more than words could have. One evening, he passed me in the hall, paused, and said quietly, "You think you're clever." I didn't stop walking. "I think I'm awake." The courthouse date loomed. Patricia prepared me for testimony, for cross-examination, for the sharp sting of Cassandra's questions. She coached me, answer directly, don't volunteer extras, stay steady. On the eve of trial, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the dark yard where once we'd strung lights for family barbecues. My reflection in the glass looked older, sharper. I whispered, "Let her sign it and we'll take it all." The words no longer sliced, they steeled. Because tomorrow, in front of judge and record, Robert would face the storm he had summoned. And I, Sarah Whitman, would no longer whisper back. On the morning of the hearing, I rose before dawn, long before Robert stirred. The air in the house was heavy, like a stage, moments before the curtain rose. My body trembled with nerves, but beneath them a current of resolve ran steady. This day was not only about survival, it was about truth. Patricia met me on the courthouse steps, files tucked under her arm, eyes sharp but kind. "You look strong," she said. "I feel like I'm made of glass," I admitted. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Glass cuts deeper when it breaks." The courtroom was smaller than I imagined, but every detail magnified: the dark wood paneling, the echo of footsteps, the judge's bench looming high above. Robert sat at the opposing table, Cassandra at his side, Mercer behind them, like a shadow. Robert wore his best navy suit, the one he saved for holidays and funerals. His face was calm, almost smug. When our eyes met, he didn't flinch. His lips curled into the faintest smile, as though to remind me of the whisper I had overheard. "Let her sign it, and we'll take it all." Proceedings began. Cassandra's voice rang clear as she outlined Robert's petition. She painted him as a dutiful husband, a man concerned only with fairness, eager to move forward. She spoke of equitable distribution and reasonable settlement. Patricia's turn followed. Her tone was clipped, deliberate. "This is not a case of simple dissolution, Your Honor. This is a case of deception, coercion, and fraudulent transfers designed to strip my client of everything she built over decades of marriage." The judge, a gray-haired woman with glasses perched low, listened without expression. Then came the evidence. Patricia laid out each document: property deeds shuffled into Mercer's trust insurance policies, altered annuities hidden. With each page, Robert's smile faltered slightly, though his jaw stayed locked. Cassandra objected often, her voice sharp, but the judge sustained little. When Patricia produced copies of the drafts Cassandra had brought to my dining table, a ripple went through the courtroom. "These documents were presented under the guise of estate planning," Patricia said. "In reality, they sought to extinguish my client's rights entirely. That is not equity. That is fraud." I dared a glance at Robert. His face was no longer smug. It was stone. My testimony followed. Patricia guided me gently. "Mrs. Whitman, how did you first become aware of your husband's intentions?" I swallowed. I overheard him. He whispered to Mr. Mercer, "Let her sign it and we'll take it all." A murmur rose among the few spectators. The judge tapped her gavel softly for silence. "And how did that make you feel?" Patricia asked. The words caught in my throat, like my life was being carved away in secret, like I was no longer a wife, but an obstacle. Cassandra cross-examined me next. Her questions were fast-slicing, designed to trip me. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Whitman, that your husband always handled finances?" "Yes," I said. I trusted him. "And isn't it true that you signed documents in the past without reading every line?" "Yes," I said softly, because I believed he would never use them against me. Her smile flickered. "So perhaps you misunderstood this situation too." I lifted my chin. "No, because this time I listened." The trial stretched over hours. Mercer testified briefly, but under Patricia's cross he faltered. Dates didn't align. Transfers lacked explanation. His polished exterior cracked under the weight of details. By late afternoon, closing arguments began. Cassandra urged the court to dismiss my claims as paranoid suspicions. Patricia countered with quiet fury. Paranoia is fear without proof. We have proof in abundance." The judge recessed for deliberation. In the waiting room, I sat beside Patricia, my hands folded tight. Robert passed by once, not looking at me, jaw rigid. I wondered if he heard the echo of his whisper, now mocking him instead of me. After nearly an hour, we were called back in. The judge adjusted her glasses, shuffled papers, and began to speak. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "This court has reviewed the evidence. It is the finding of this court that Mr. Whitman engaged in deceptive practices to conceal marital assets. These transfers are void. The petition as filed is denied." I felt the air leave my lungs. The judge continued. "Furthermore, the court recognizes Mrs. Whitman's right to full discovery and equitable division moving forward. Any attempt to coerce or mislead her will result in sanctions." I turned toward Robert. For the first time, his mask broke completely. His face hardened, drained of color eyes, flat and lifeless. Stone. Exactly as I had imagined. The gavel struck. The storm had broken, but I was still standing. As we gathered our papers, Patricia leaned close. "This is only the beginning, but you've already won more than you realize." I nodded, though my gaze lingered on Robert. He sat motionless as if carved from the very marble beneath the judge's bench. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because the battle was finished, it wasn't, but because I had proven to myself that silence was not my destiny. And somewhere behind me, I knew Robert was learning that betrayal always carries its own reckoning. When the judge's gavel struck, the sound echoed longer in my mind than in the courtroom. It wasn't just wood against wood. It was the crack of a wall, collapsing, the sound of my marriage ending, not with reconciliation, but with revelation. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon sun was bright, almost blinding. Reporters weren't there. This wasn't a spectacle for the papers. But to me, it felt monumental enough to deserve headlines. Patricia walked beside me, steady, purposeful, her file tucked like a soldier's weapon. "You did well in there," she said. I let out a shaky laugh. "I didn't faint, so that counts for something." She smiled faintly. "It counts for everything. Now you start over with knowledge and with power." Starting over. The words tasted foreign. For decades, my identity was entwined with Robert's, our home, our traditions, our shared routines. But now, each thread was cut. I thought of the nights we once danced in the kitchen, of birthdays, marked with laughter, of the promises whispered under starlight. I grieved them all, even as I knew those moments had become weapons sharpened against me. I drove home alone that night. The silence inside the car was immense, broken only by the soft hum of tires on asphalt. Every traffic light seemed suspended in time, every turn heavy with symbolism. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house loomed ahead, familiar yet altered, like a photograph fading at the edges. Inside, I walked from room to room. The dining table where Cassandra had laid her papers still bore faint scratches from her pen. The hallway where I'd overheard Robert's whisper seemed haunted by the echo. The bedroom carried the scent of him still mingled with betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers across the quilt I had stitched years ago. Tears came not hot with anger, but cool with sorrow. It wasn't just the loss of Robert I mourned. It was the loss of trust, the loss of who I had been when I believed in him. The weeks that followed blurred together. Lawyers drafted new filings. Accountants uncovered more hidden transfers. Patricia guided me like a lighthouse through a storm, always pointing toward solid ground. Robert avoided me completely. When he did appear, his demeanor was distant, as if I were a stranger. His face was still stone. No flicker of regret, no glimmer of the man I once knew. Perhaps stone was all he had left. Neighbors whispered, friends chose sides. Some called to say they always suspected Robert of selfishness. Others avoided me as though betrayal might be contagious. Through it all, I discovered an unexpected strength: solitude. Evenings alone by the fire, mornings with coffee and silence, afternoons with books untouched for years. Slowly, I began to know myself apart from him. One afternoon, I met Patricia in her office to sign yet another stack of forms. "You're holding up well?" she said. I tilted my head. "Do I look like I am?" She leaned back. "You look like someone who's finding her voice. Most women in your position whisper. You spoke. That's no small thing." Her words stayed with me long after I left. Most women whisper. You spoke. Perhaps that was the real victory, not the annulled transfers or the voided petition, but the courage to speak truth aloud. Months passed. The final settlement was still in progress, but my fear had vanished. Each legal motion was just another step, not a cliff edge. I had stood in court, faced Robert's stone mask, and lived. On a quiet Sunday morning, I walked to the garden. The roses I once neglected bloomed wild red and defiant. I knelt, touching the petals, breathing in their scent. They had survived neglect storm's frost, and still they grew. For the first time in years, I smiled, not forced, not fragile, but real. If you are listening to my story, perhaps you have felt betrayal too. Perhaps you know what it is to discover whispers meant to erase you. I share this not to wallow in bitterness, but to remind you silence is not your destiny. You can speak, you can stand, you can reclaim what was meant to be yours. Robert thought he could take it all. In the end, all he took was the mask from his own face, revealing nothing but stone beneath. As for me, I found something better than revenge. I found myself. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. If my story resonates, I invite you to reflect, to share it with someone who might need strength today, and if you wish to stay connected by subscribing. Stories like mine are not just tales of loss. They are testaments of survival resilience and the power of voice. This chapter of my life closes here, but yours may just be beginning. Choose it with courage. Choose it with truth.